Welcome to the Black and Brown in STEM event. This event is organized by Minority Innovation Weekend, National Society of Black Engineers, Black Metro Area Chapter, and the Society of Hispanic Engineers, DC Chapter. And this will be the first episode of season number 2 of the MIW Disruptive podcast, hosted by our new co-host, Tracy, Sir Walter, and me, Jerome. And to our live audience out there, if you have questions for the panelists, please place your questions in the chat, and we will attempt to get to as many questions as time permits. And today, of course, we have an amazing panelist of STEM professionals that I have the pleasure to introduce. First up, we have Marisol Mazon. She is a medical student at the University of Utah School of Medicine. How you doing? We also have Carlton Sapp. He's the Vice President of Analytics and AI Research at Gartner. Also, Tori Sunbright. She's the EdTech Coordinator at Plano Independent School District, as well as Jasmine Statton, Diversity and Inclusion Program Manager at Dell Technology. Andres Marquez, he's a software engineer at Facebook. Unfortunately, we got word that Mr. George Smith will not be joining us, but we got Lee Pham here, who's a former chief of staff at American Express and also an intellectual property expert. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
All right. It's me, Sir Walter. I'm the co-host and moderator for this panel discussion. Let's start with Jasmine. Why did you choose a career in STEM as your to work towards or work in?
Yeah, so I have been in the industry for only 3 years. So in high school, I automatically knew I was naturally good in math and science. So I was naturally drawn to a STEM career. I knew I was very inquisitive. I asked a lot of questions. So I thought like an engineer. And what put the cherry on top is that my first job in high school, I worked at Best Buy. So I was surrounded by all of these different gadgets, and I just love being around all of these new technologies. So that's when I decided to get my degree in computer science, and that's what started my journey to pursuing the STEM profession.
Thank you, Carlton.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. So, it was really, it's a shameless plug, but it was Nesby and a company called Inroads back in Raleigh, North Carolina, that really took me into the engineering area. I started off in business, moved over to engineering. I loved it. I didn't start early on in my college career, but I ended up, moving into that space because of programs. They're on my campus. They introduced me to different opportunities. I took advantage of those opportunities, and here I am today. So thank you.
Lee, why did you choose a career in STEM?
So it's good to hear Jasmine and Carlton's stories and interested in hearing everyone else's. We make these decisions when we are very young in our lives, before you turn 18 and before you go to college. For me, I'll be honest with you, it was a guidance counselor in high school, a proficiency in math and science, and money. Like I think maybe a lot of people who may be listening to this or watching this, I did not come from an advantaged background. And this was not only something that I was good at, but it was economic opportunity for myself and for my family. And, I think that's why a lot of us, we may have been brought in by Inroads, Act 101, by Nesby, whatever it is, or a mentor. There's also some of that family expectation in seeing you succeed and seeing you be a productive contributor to the family. And so for me, it was the proficiency, the economic background, and I'm naturally good at it. I like building things.
Excellent. We have a lot of panelists, so I may not ask everyone the same question, just to keep it interesting. So starting with Andre, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Andre Marquez. What do you think are some of the challenges that exist for Black and brown people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics?
Sure. Thank you, Walter. Yeah, challenges. I think this is a situation, I guess, that spans across so many levels. Usually, the ones like you hear the most is basically you don't get people that look like you or that have had experiences such as yours to be in this kind of really good, I guess, academic or positions in industry. And maybe that lack of visibility many times makes kids, right? Because these problems start at a very young age. So for example, kids don't see that and they don't see it as an option. Maybe they see it as this magical thing that you need maybe something else to be able to make it happen, right? So the lack of visibility is one of them. There might also be cultural issues like where kids or students are being told no, that is too difficult. Traditionally only like really smart people can make it there. I personally do not like referring to anything as smart or intelligent. I like to refer to things as working hard, right? So that person is good in what he or she does because he or she works really hard, right? So maybe putting that thought into the people minds about is more about like working hard and not so much about having something in you, or it's not something that your family has to give you, and if your family does not have it, you are never going to be able to make it, right? So maybe creating that, like, I guess that awareness of the possibility of doing it. So yeah, I guess many challenges that start at a very young age. With CHEP, the nonprofit I lead here in Silicon Valley, we do a lot of work in that. So I think there are just too many areas. And as you start going like higher, I guess, if you go to a company, then you start seeing other issues, right? Where maybe some people don't get the visibility they deserve. Maybe they do not get assigned to the most impactful projects, and that maybe long term is going to impact their career. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm talking too much, but there are just so many challenges at different age groups, I think.
Yeah, I can see all those challenges. Marisol Manzon, what have been some challenges for you? Future doctor, is that correct? Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like, I grew up in Mexico. I moved to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. And I feel like growing up, I never really saw, I think Andres hit it right in the nail when he said that most of the time you don't see people of color in places of like, I never saw a physician. I never saw a Latina doctor. So I never kind of saw any of that. And it's also just not having that mentorship, like not knowing who to reach out to. That's some of the hardest things that, in my case, that was the hard thing, to not knowing who to reach out to, because there's a way, and there's resources. It's just not knowing who to reach out to that was kind of hard.
Thank you. Through our discussions, a lot of times we hear that a lot of Black and brown people are underrepresented in the STEM field. Jasmine, do you have any thoughts on that? Why do you feel as though Black and brown people are underrepresented in the STEM field?
Sorry, trying to come off of mute. I mean, there are so many challenges. I mean, as mentioned before, why we aren't represented in STEM. I mean, personally, for me, I don't have anyone in my family that's in a STEM field. It's not something that is popular. I went to school in Mississippi and Louisiana, which were lower in the educational department. So I wasn't really taught anything about STEM. So I think where we went to school with, our predicament, our environment, there are so many things that can wrap around and be the reason why there aren't a lot of people in STEM. And also, I would like to speak on sponsorship. So you do have mentorship, but sponsors are people who are in a room speaking your name, who are advocating for you for that role. And we don't have a lot of people of color who are in those positions of power to say, hey, I want Jasmine on this team because of her skills. So I'm starting to see more based on what's been happening around the world. But I think we need to continue to sponsor our people and making sure they are in those positions of power.
Thank you. Oh, Tori Sunbright, looks like I skipped you. I'm going to come right back to you right now. Why do you feel as though Black and brown people are underrepresented, and what can we do to change that? Oh, Tori, you're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So I agree 100% with Jasmine. I think that sponsorship beyond mentorship is going to be 100% required for us to help up and coming individuals who would like to begin a career in STEM. I know that, as basically above and beyond that, we also need to be qualified individuals. So we don't want to be sponsored just because of the color of our skin, but we do want to be a part of a conversation when we're in the room and we actually know what we're talking about. We're skilled, we have a skill set, we can contribute in a good way to whatever industry it is we work in. But I agree 100% that if you're in a position, then you need to start reaching out to individuals who have the qualifications to bring something to maybe a program. I mean, you might be in charge of a project, you might be a project manager. You could say, there might be a role where you can get someone who could contribute and their background, their interests, and you can say, okay, this role would be great for you. What about having Jasmine come in and do XYZ? And so for me, I just agree that we need to start promoting each other and putting getting other people in the room to have an opportunity to show out their skill set.
Thank you, Tori. Tracy, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have Tarsha, who asked, how many of you all on the panel are either employers or instructors?
Can you clarify the question?
How many of you all on the panel are either employers or instructors? She finds that the lack of job or pathways to create jobs is an issue in STEM for Black and brown children. So I want to know how many of you are in these positions to be able to employ or teach people on these subject matters.
So I'll kick it off. This is Carlton. I work for Gardner. I am primarily here to recruit. So I am a managing vice president, there's a perception that there is a lack of skill, and I think that there's more so a lack of sourcing and connection. And so the perception is there lacks Black and brown advancements in those technologies. I particularly cover artificial intelligence, so that's what I recruit. And if you please send me your resume, I'm happy to recruit. I'm looking forward to sourcing. But we do need to understand that there is a perception out there. And my job is to try to help my organization understand that that's just a perception. There are qualified opportunities for people in color. There are different social fractures in different regions. For example, I think in Asia Pacific, it's a little different. People of color in technology are advancing in those areas. So different parts of the world, different regions have different terminologies of people in color and underrepresented diversity or underrepresented communities. So it's important that we show ourselves and be a part of that conversation as already been mentioned. So thank you.
If I may, those were very insightful responses on behalf of Carlton. I am not in a position to hire, and I am not an educator per se. I think we all, though, are anyone that is in a profession and has a vocation is in a position to teach. And that can be in any number of ways, whether you're a mentor, sponsor. When we say sponsor, if you're not familiar with that term, that's corporate America speak. It's an advocate, someone who stands up for you and speaks well of you when you're not in the room. But we are all in a position to teach in a number of different ways. I think if if you're looking for job opportunities, then I think that you should seek those through your mentors. And so I guess what I'm proposing to the questioner is find people who are common points of contact for both. People who can put you in position where you can get exposure to job opportunities, and they can give you the coaching, insight, information that you need to do well in the conversations that you'll have. There's a lot to talk about in this space, so I'll just kind of hone in on what we've already discussed to refine it. We talk about being underrepresented, and that is a term of that's been commonly used, especially in the past year or so, as we're seeing in society have an impact in the workplace. I also like to use language that is productive but can be uncomfortable. And we are underrepresented because we are underincluded. And so know your audience. But I think that we should understand who we are, because if we use language that doesn't paint us in a complete light, we may misunderstand ourselves, right? And so back to the question, that's part of the education. It's not only knowing the substance of what you're going to achieve, but it's understanding the context around what you want to achieve. So I hope that's responsive.
Definitely. Thank you both, Lee and Carlton, for your responses. We're going to take two more. I see that Michelle asks, is there any advice for a mechanical engineer that is trying to go into patent law?
Am I the only patent attorney here? So any advice, first of all, just make sure this is for everyone. Anyone considering law, period. It doesn't have to be patent law. And Michelle may have some insight that everyone doesn't. To be called a patent attorney, you must have an engineering degree or a degree on a list of approved degrees, and then go to law school and then pass two different bar exams. There is the state bar and then there's the patent bar. There are very few Black patent attorneys. Why? Because we're talking about 4 barriers: into and out of engineering school, into and out of law school, pass your state bar, which Black and brown people pass at a lower rate, and then pass the patent bar, which is another hard test. There's the context, Michelle, to your question. Because you're a patent attorney doesn't mean you have to always be a patent attorney. You can focus on cybersecurity, privacy, secure transactions, criminal defense, whatever you want. And so investing in a law degree is 3 years in school and a lot of hard work and a lot of money. Make sure you want to do it. Just like you want to be sure that engineering is the right profession for you. Being an attorney is a career and it's a lifestyle. And I don't mean like in the glitz glam, suits TV lawyer kind of way. It's a lot of work. You do it all the time. And so just make sure that you're committed to it. The best thing I can do is go back to my previous response. Talk to people that are already there. Find people that look like you, that can talk to you, give you that real talk. And, you make the best decision you can.
All right. Thanks again for that answer. Hope that answered your question, Michelle. So I'm going to take the last question for now, but don't worry, we will definitely have more room for questions at the end. So just keep dropping your questions in the chat. So Kevin asks, what barriers to STEM exposure have you seen in your respective fields? For example, the cost of computing has dropped dramatically, but that may not be true for other STEM areas.
Question, I not take it, sorry.
What barriers to the STEM exposure have you seen in your respective fields?
STEM exposure, yeah. So let's see. Let's try to understand what the STEM exposure means. So one thing we see a lot is, for example, when you go to a neighborhood versus another, the availability of like computing resources, the kind of classes that are offered are very different. So that's a big challenge that we see a lot, even here in Silicon Valley. You can go to a school, then drive 10 miles to another one, and it's like two completely different worlds. So I think that's a big challenge in terms of education. Basically, not everyone is getting access to the same resources at a very early age. And unfortunately, STEM and I would say, I guess, every field is complex and difficult, and you're going to have to put a lot of time and learn everything you need in order to be prepared to go to the next step, right? So if early on you are not getting that proper and really good education, is only going to get more challenging every time, right? So the good thing about, for example, some of the organizations and nonprofits is we try to raise a lot of awareness on this. So basically talking to people directly. If for some reason you are in a school that you feel, okay, I don't know, I don't have access to computers, but maybe you're lucky to have one at home. Of course, like the digital technologies that we have available nowadays really allow almost anyone to get access to almost everything. So I think that's a barrier that is more or less being brought down. But I would say if you're in a situation, let's say that you feel that you don't have enough resources or the resources that you need, I think you're going to have to put a lot of effort from your side. Again, as Lee was saying, try to find people around you. If they don't look like you for whatever reason, try to find what we call allies, which are people basically, they don't have to be Latino, brown, or black. To give you feedback. There are enough people out there who are willing to support our communities or any other underrepresented community or any community that feels under like that is struggling, I guess. So yeah, I mean, reach out a lot, ask your teachers, they will be able to guide you, professors, whatever that is, and try to do some work on your own, because as I said, yeah, I think it's very important to start, I guess, early on. And that applies to everyone, right? Like, for example, in my case, if I want to be at a certain level 10, 15 years from now, the same thing applies, right? Like I can already be an engineer. Maybe I'm doing my job well, I hope. but if I want to be in that next step, there are many things I have to learn, right? And if for whatever reason I'm not getting those experiences, maybe I can find ways kind of on my own, through people, through mentors, to get exposed to those experiences I feel I'm going to need. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Andre. This is for anyone. How do you think automation will change your role in the future? Over the last 10 years, things have rapidly changed. We have there's more likelihood that there's going to be a self-driving car this decade. You can do all types of things on your phone. Slack is great. Zoom has been awesome this last year. So take it away, anyone.
I think maybe I can go. I guess this has been a conversation, I think, that has been going on for a while now. I mean, given how rapidly, like, especially tech, we're talking about STEM fields, I guess, has grown, and it has like percolated into so many areas, right? Like from medicine and not only engineering, now driving technology, etc. It has not happened in that sense, right? Like, it's not like tech has in any way driven, let's say, the unemployment rate high, right? I think in the last maybe 5-8 years, of course, if we put COVID aside, I don't think the unemployment rate, let's say, was high because of, I don't know, technology has automated so many things. So there are a couple ways to look at this. One is that maybe some jobs are going to be automated, yes, but so many others are going to be created, right? So like, how many companies are going to be driving that technology, right? And I think, or I like to think, that's one of the reasons why there is a strong push in the United States and around the world to really push, I guess, the younger generations, right, to get into these areas, because these areas have really improved, like, I guess, quality of life in so many different ways. There are so many rooms for improvement across so many fields. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. Like, if something gets automated, for example, anything on my role. I work with cameras. I am a software engineer, so if anything gets automated there, basically that's an opportunity for you to use that tool, right? So if someone is automating something, okay, that's good. I don't have to spend, let's say, any more time doing that. I can spend time maybe improving that tool, or doing the things I couldn't do before because I didn't have such a tool. So I think it's, I guess, a matter of how you look at it.
And to real quick to throw in, I would say technology is always changing. I would say you're always learning something new. After college, it doesn't end there. You will continue to learn on the job. I'm always learning about new software that is coming out at Dell, new hardware that's coming out, because I need to be well informed when I am speaking to my customers. So I would say continue to go on YouTube, continue to talk to people, have one-on-one conversations with your mentor to stay up to date on technology, because it is moving fast and we do need people like you who can come into those positions and continue to move it and make the change happen.
Absolutely. And adding to Jasmine, I think that's great. Also think about what's adjacent to these technologies, right? So if you think about what Lee said earlier, there are a lot of, for example, in artificial intelligence, there's a lot of legal implications to that. You talk about video recognition, there's a lot of bias. There's a lot of legal implications, social responsibilities that are out there that are just emerging all the way to Capitol Hill on the use of technology. So I think that there are opportunities that are adjacent to the automation piece that we should be plugged into. And so if you consider that, I think you'll see that there are going to be, to Andre's point, more jobs because of automation rather than less.
In your experience, this is anyone's experience, what is the best resource for people who want to dive deeper into artificial intelligence and machine learning? Where should they go?
So one of the things that obviously there are two primary options here. You can take an academic route through universities. You can also look at the massive emergence of MOOC courses, which are massively online courses that you can take through Coursera. So there's a number of options there, but I will say, so those are definitely an avenue. I would also look at networks. If you tend to do things on your own, I think we miss the opportunity to leverage networks, organizations and societies that are investing in this technology. There's, for example, Blacks in Technology. There's even Blacks in AI. There are a lot of different opportunities and networks that are training each other, and they're gaining knowledge. They're sharing knowledge and gaining knowledge in those organizations and in those ecosystems. And that is really how you spread and get known in the industry in terms of AI. They also stay on top of the research as it trends and as it moves and as the technology goes in different directions. You're always at that front. So look at those traditional routes through academic sources, universities, and through MOOCs, but also consider the networks. So when I say networks, again, I'm talking competitions as well. Those should be included in your path to understanding artificial intelligence.
I'd add to what Carlton just suggested. Subscribe to a business publication. Subscribe to a business publication that you would not normally read or you think is for someone else. It's for you if you have money. So the Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, pay that monthly subscription, and there are entire sections of these publications that are dedicated to what CIOs, CTOs, CEOs are focused on when it comes to these emerging technologies, whether it's AI and machine learning, whether it's crypto and blockchain, whether it's batteries and renewables. Because all this stuff is commercial, right? We're doing it as a society because we like to advance society. We're also doing it because it's commercial. It makes money. And so the question is, I think about, really it's about employability, right? Am I going to be able to sell my time in the future in the way that I'm planning to do so now? And for some people, the answer is no. And so the best way to solve for that is to understand, well, what is commercial? And if we're looking at machine learning, yeah, it's great to understand it at an expert level and know the jargon, etc. But if it's not commercial, then what does it really mean? And who is going to hire you? I had the opportunity here from an executive at Goldman Sachs a few years ago, and he used the word commercial in his talk on the stage countless times. Goldman Sachs is one of the largest employers of engineers in New York City. And the reason why they do what they do well is they hire technologists who understand the commercial aspect of what they're building. And so whether that's machine learning, whether it's AI, understand the technological, but also understand the commercial aspects as well, and invest in understanding it.
So can I just add to, I put into the chat a couple of websites that if anyone's interested, you can check them out in terms of finding some classes or finding some courses that you want to take, and maybe just, dip, what is that? What do they say? Like, put one little foot in the pond or test the waters out, right? And those are ones that I've looked into myself and I found them to be helpful. So feel free to jot those down or take a look at it if you'd like.
All right, so I see that we do have a few more audience questions. So I'm going to go with Federico. All right, so we have students from more rural regions where traditional jobs are lacking exposure to tech skills that are needed in the fourth industrial revolution. So the question to the panelists is, how can this skills gap be solved?
Okay, let me try. I think this is a very difficult question, right? So I would guess some of the things I hear, at least in terms of like planning from the local governments and even I guess at the national level, is at this date and time, we should try so that every person, not only of course in big cities, but also in rural towns, have access to like fast internet technology, right? I think that's probably the first one you're going to need. So once you have that, then you can probably access Tori's links, the ones that she provided, and there are a lot of online resources, of course, for learning pretty much any topic you want. Again, it may depend on what age groups you're talking about. Of course, you're going to need like good elementary education, middle school education, high school education before you even start talking about getting a college degree, right? And so getting, I guess, all the basic knowledge you need to go to college. So I think there are efforts in that area. I mean, guaranteeing that I guess everyone in the US have access to digital technologies and what some people call the digital divide, right? Like if you don't have access to those technologies, you're a clear disadvantage. If you have to wait for a printed newspaper or magazine to read a specific kind of news, then you're at a disadvantage because everyone else is getting everything in real time and you can access much more resources, right? So I don't know if anyone else from the panelists has a better answer, but I think I think there is some piece of it that has to be solved at the national level, I guess.
So I would just like to add, because before my current career in education, before I worked in telecommunications, and so the big companies, they are aware of the problem. Many of them are working with government at state levels to basically fund, basically where the government will pay the extra money that's required to build out the network and the infrastructure. And I don't want to make this a political conversation, but I do want to say that you might want to begin by writing the legislators or writing someone in government at a local level and trying to basically ask them what they can do, if anything, so that they can be in talks with the companies that provide the internet. Because what Andres said is 100% right. I mean, we could post the website in the chat, but if you don't have access to the internet, or if you have access to the internet, but it's at an unaffordable rate, then we're going to have to work on that first. And so I would reach out to anybody or figure out who it is in your community that is responsible for making those choices and those decisions.
Thank you both for answering. So we have Michaela. Michaela would like to know, which is a good one, what is your stance on creating innovation that will inevitably hurt the poor and working class?
So yeah, I guess if frame it like that, like if innovating in technology that is gonna hurt the poor and working class, yeah, I guess the answer would be no. But it gets more tricky than that usually, right? Because the conversation is in what sense, right? For example, just to go back to the previous question, where some people have said, "Oh, technology is not so good." I have been like personally asked whenever I have been speaking at whatever event about, "Oh, this technology, for example, self-driving technology. What about the people who drive trucks, and maybe are they going to lose their jobs?" Right? So again, you go back to the conversation of how much automation can hurt, for example, a certain population. Unfortunately, many times innovation does come at a cost, at a loss of job in some other area. So, for example, yes, maybe if Amazon didn't exist, then maybe, I don't know, Walmart would be selling more, Target would be selling more, the book stores, I forgot the name, Barnes and Noble maybe would be selling more right now. But also, you also have to think how much development Amazon has created, right? So a lot of opportunities in that area. They have driven a couple technologies that just didn't exist in the past, and that someone could argue, okay, if Amazon didn't come into the picture, they wouldn't be on right now. Like the cloud as a platform, like you can go and rent cloud services from Amazon, right? Things like that. So again, in the way the question is framed, no, I would not support, I guess, technology that hurts people like that. But yeah, I mean, sometimes the conversation is much more complex, I guess.
Unless you're building a torture machine or a weapon of war, technology doesn't hurt people. People use technology against other people and then cause them harm. And that's a high-level policy discussion. I think for this panel and for the folks that are listening and watching, you've got to understand that corporations are just groups of people. They're groups of people that are organized around a set of rules and laws, and they compete against another set of rules in whatever investment or economic community they're a part of, right? And so if the concern is that innovation can be misused to harm a certain group of people, and if you've got a personal aversion to that and you think that you want to do something about it, be in charge of the company, be in charge of the government, be the CEO, be the CIO, the CTO, the head of department. It doesn't have to be a massive organization. It can be a startup or an emerging late stage organization. It doesn't have to be being president of the United States to be in charge of procurement for your county. What technology are we buying? To be in charge of zoning for your local area? Are we going to build this manufacturing plant here? And what are the trade-offs for the community with their economic outcomes versus the environmental outcome? And taking into account who they are and what they may be dealing with without the plant, right? And so innovation comes from people. Innovation is managed by people. Innovation is commercialized by people. And so I wish we were all in the same room, because I would turn the question back around. What would you do as a CIO, CEO, mayor, governor, whatever, what have you, board member, that would help solve thorny questions around innovation that can be easily misused to hurt or hinder certain groups of people?
and get into it legally too, the legal route. There, as I said before, there are many options for folks to go into the law, the legal industry, fighting for proper use of technology. It's a double-edged sword in many ways because, you know, most of the times there's a for-profit, there's an economic advantage of doing it, but there are success stories out there where communities have gotten together and either participated in the voting system, got legislation in process so that technology and innovation can't be misused. So I think that there's also an opportunity to dive in there from a legal perspective.
Thank you. From a career standpoint, we've all started someplace, but we may have moved on to another area. If you're not doing what you're doing, you know, what you set out to do when you first went to undergrad, let me reframe this question. Are you doing what you set out to do in undergrad? If you're not, how has your STEM background prepared you for your current role? Tori, you can take this one.
Okay, sure. So I feel like I'm finally doing what I went to undergrad for. In a previous question, I stated that I worked for a major telecommunications company, actually the two biggest telecommunications companies. I worked for both of them. And I worked for them in a role that basically dealt with marketing. I was a translator actually for them for about 15 years. So this is my second career. But having gone to school to study math and computer science and to end up being a translator, it was a little bit daunting for me. You know, of course I was good at what I did because I had also studied that, but that isn't where I wanted to be in my career. And so it's kind of the reverse answer to your question that I started out over there, and now I'm actually where I want to be. And so for me to have a career in technology is exciting. And then for me to be lucky enough to blend that and work in technology in an education space, it's like just such a fulfilling role for me. So I hope I answered your question, even though it's kind of the opposite of what you asked.
Thank you. There's some value in there, right? Jasmine?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I went to school for computer science, but then when I started at Dell, I decided to go back to get my MBA. I would say within the 3 years, I've moved a lot because you can see on the flyer, it says that I'm in diversity and inclusion. Well, ever since then, I have moved back into IT at Dell. So I started out in IT doing something called product management. This is where you build software from launch to start from the ground up. And then I moved from product management, moved into diversity and inclusion because there was an IT need. So in different departments, you can have different needs for IT. There was a need to build a new diversity and inclusion tool in the IT department. So I went over there and I helped out. And then from there, someone tapped me on the shoulder to come back into IT to work on a new project. So I would say you don't have to stay in the IT department or the engineering department because our background is needed everywhere. Technology is everywhere. Whether you're in HR, they use technology to do their work. So I wouldn't limit myself into staying in different type of departments. I would say I took on the opportunity. I saw where I can make a difference and I went that path.
Are you there?
Here, I apologize. I am on my OB-GYN rotation, and then we have a lady coming in, and she's gonna give birth in a few minutes or hours. But I am driving there. But I started out, so I have a bachelor's of science in chemistry. I knew that medicine was the end goal for me. I do not use chemistry now at all, but that was the end goal for me. So I saw the big picture. And I think I absolutely agree with what Jasmine said. Sometimes there's a lot of pathways that you can take, and ultimately just being happy of where you are and then just looking to the future of where you want to be. Like all those paths can take you there. And for me, I always kept in mind the big picture. And even now, I'm applying to plastics and reconstructive. And again, there's a lot of pathways that could get me there. And again, just looking at the big picture of where I want to go, where I want to head, and just what do I need to do to get there. And then there's a lot of paths that I could take, but just sort of keep moving forward. No matter what, just keep heading towards that end goal.
Thank you. Go ahead.
If I may, I just want to give Marisol props for having the presence of mind to talk about careers while driving a car on her way to deliver a baby. I saw you in your car, and I thought you may be doing a rotation, and you just confirmed it. So congratulations on what you're doing, and thank you for being awesome. To the question, I just wrote a paper that got published by the Executive Leadership Council about this. And the paper addresses the intersection of code switching and executive leadership and their common roots in the brain. Basically, I'm saying people who code switch, so Black and brown people in the United States, especially in corporate America, are neurologically wired to be able to do all these different kinds of things. And that's required for leadership. So if you want to read the paper, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's posted there on my profile. It's also on my website, which is my first name, last name.com, leefam.com. I am chemical engineer by undergrad, lawyer after that, never really practiced law, went into transactions and strategy at a financial services company, pivoted off of that to executive leadership, M&A, venture investing, and the like. So these degrees that we get, they're like wristbands in the club, right? They're like wristbands to get into the Fed. You don't have to stay there. You can always come in and out if you like it there, and if you see things better, if it's better outside of the VIP, if it's better at the other Fed, then you go do that, and you can do that because you've earned the opportunity to do so by earning your degree.
I like it. Andre, do you have any thoughts on that, or what's your role again? Are you doing what you went to school for?
Yes. So, I went to electrical engineering. So actually, I'm from Colombia. We call it electronic engineering over there. Then I came to the US. I got my master's in electrical engineering. So I have had a bit of career switches, I guess, but more in terms of what I work on, like hardware versus software and different technologies. So yeah, I think being open about it, like if you see certain technologies gaining momentum, and you enjoy it and you feel you have the skills, I think you can take steps to do that. There are a lot of some roles are going to require maybe to get an extra level of education. Maybe you can use the MOOCs to get the skills you need for that specific role. I guess, like for example, if I wanted to switch to AI right now, there are a few pathways I guess I could take. I think it's fine. I mean, it's common. Companies accept it a lot. They are very open to people switching roles, switching groups. Of course, it's much better when someone switches groups within your organization if the person is a top performer than that person leaving the company, right? So I think it's positive to switch. Yep.
Well, the next question is, do you feel it's necessary to move away from STEM for career advancement? Everyone's mentioned they've done something else. Do you feel it was necessary to leave STEM to do so? I want to ask Jasmine this.
I did leave for an advancement. I did, but I didn't lose any of my technical background. So any of the projects that I was on, I always brought a different lens to the project compared to the other folks on the team, because they have always been, in that type of environment. So I've always volunteered for like the technical projects, whether I'm outside of IT or not. But I did definitely move for the career progression because I'm young in my career And like my father told me, he said, you have to take on a lot of the opportunities now, because as you get older, you can be a part of that frozen middle where you're trying to break that glass ceiling. So I wanted to definitely start earlier in my career, but it was a blessing in disguise, because I moved back into IT. So it all happened for a reason.
Watson, did you change careers?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry about that, folks. I had technical difficulties here. So no, I did not change. I actually started late through the programs, as I mentioned earlier, like NSBE and Inroads. And my actual first job out of college was IBM in Raleigh, North Carolina, Research Triangle Park. And I stayed in it. I stayed in that particular trajectory the entire time. So I've gone in different, subgroups within that, but for the most part, staying within engineering, math, and technology has been something I've been consistent with.
If anyone else has any thoughts on that question, feel free. Otherwise, we're going to move to the audience questions. Go ahead, Lee.
I'll just be really quick. The answer is no. You don't have to move out of tech for career advancement. I think Jasmine touched on it. It's the interdisciplinary nature of your work. If you can bring more than one thing to the table, you're more valuable. And I'll cite an anecdotal data point from my experience, and then I'll just point out some examples. There are a lot of non-technologists pretending to be technologists in the room quite often. In business meetings with the engineers shuttered away somewhere. And a lot of people who are not technologists have learned to speak technology to business people and be the go-between. So the answer is no, people want to be technologists. And then the other data point I'll reference is there are a few engineers by training and by career who are Black and doing really well in the corporate space. There's a man by the name of Kareem. I cite him in my paper. I can't remember his name right now, but he is basically over the Disney streaming services, and I believe he's an engineer by training. A number of others as well. And in order to be, the head of an organization at a company that's leveraging technology, it's better to be an engineer. You understand your entry level analysts, you understand your principal engineers, you understand, even if you're not on top of the technology, the thought process is there, the rapport is there. And so I think that you're very well suited for upper level movement in your career with your tech background.
Tracy, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, so we have Ola Yanka asked or stated that as an early career engineering student myself in search for their first co-op or internship, what did you all do to stand out? What did you all do to stand out of your competition at the time?
I'll kick us off here. So I took a little bit of opposite of what Lee had mentioned. I started to look at the business effect, so the impact of technology on business. And I tried to make the translation to set myself apart from everyone else. I try to describe, not only did I know a little bit about technology, but I knew more about how to apply that to make a business grow or to help a business succeed. So I really tried to, I knew I didn't want to compete just purely on some of the programming parts of it and have a debate on the granular technology disciplines. I really wanted to show that I can go above that and say, well, I get the bigger picture. So that was my strategy and it worked because I think a lot of hiring managers, including myself, I look at, yes, you know how to code, for example, but the question is, do you know how to help an organization succeed and use the technology appropriately? And so that was the bigger question to answer in that situation.
Personally for me, so I've had a few internships. I grind, man. I went to every conference. I went to the NASB conference. I waited in the long lines. I went to the SWE conference, Society of Women Engineers. I applied to scholarships. That's how I got on at Dell. I applied to the UNCF scholarship, and an internship came along with it. And nobody else applied to that scholarship because nobody believed that it was real. And I applied for it and I ended up getting the scholarship. So I see everything. Like, I have my LinkedIn page. I make sure my resume was up to date, and I continue to apply to things, and I got a lot of no's, but my yes came around the corner. So continue to do what you're doing and continue to execute, and the opportunity will come.
You have to have good grades, and good grades are not enough.
Add this really quick. I know it's interesting about what Jasmine said. It's a big +1 to that. I also worked at the National Science Foundation for a while, and what I noticed that some countries are really good at is looking for those hidden scholarships and those hidden opportunities. So that grind, I tell you, that is so important. That's such a good message, because I think we certainly don't take advantage of it. I remember when I was at the Science Foundation and we could not find money for North Americans or South Americans. All the money, China would send a huge set of resources to take advantage of these grants, scholarships, and seed them into these universities that I just don't think we take advantage of enough. So big ups to Jasmine for that. I think that's a huge important factor, is grind and find those areas that are just latent and not being taken advantage of.
Thank you, everyone. Here's another question from my bank of questions. Have you ever had to deal with any microaggressions or incidents that you deem racist while working? If so, how did you handle the incident? This is for any of the panelists. I can't read your facial expressions.
I guess I'll go first. Of course I have. I mean, some are smaller than others. I mean, being on the diversity team, I had to lead diversity training. I had to talk about anti-racism, very uncomfortable conversations. I had to talk to people who are higher than me and about these conversations. And sometimes they don't mean to come off like that, but sometimes it is very direct, and you have to try to pick and choose my battles. Sometimes it doesn't offend me, so I'm like, I don't want to get into it today, but a lot of times I do speak up. That's how I've gotten to where I've gotten now. I spoke up about what I wasn't comfortable with. I don't appreciate you touching my hair all the time. I don't appreciate some of the things that you do say. And I've seen the progress in my company of them listening to what I have spoke up about, and I've seen the improvement that has been made.
I think maybe I can add to that. That's a good question. And I have to say, I guess in a professional environment, I have to say no. Like, I have not seen it directly, and not that it has happened to me directly either. And up to a point, I kind of wish it had, right? Because I think if it was like up in the air, you could see it, like where is the other person coming from? But what I wonder sometimes is what's happening behind the scenes, right? The things you are not seeing. These conversations are probably, of course, happening, right? Just not in front of your face. And I just wish I could hear them, and not even in order to like fight them necessarily. I guess maybe I would, but just to know what's really going on, like behind the scenes, because sometimes it's not easy to understand. So sometimes, yeah, you see things happening that maybe you don't know where they are coming from. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has had any, but I have always kind of questioned that. Like, you never see it directly. I don't see it playing out directly in my work environment, in the office, during a meeting. But these things are there, right? Like, we all have biases, and yeah, unfortunately, I think many of them are not just visible enough. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what Tori has to say.
So as I mentioned before, I work at a school. I work in the education space. And yes, I've absolutely seen it happen before. It's happened to me personally. To Jasmine's point, I think that we are in a time where a lot of work and effort is going into the equity, diversity, inclusion work on behalf of a lot of companies, and not just in corporate America, but obviously in education. At my district, we just recently finished a 14-day equity challenge as part of professional development. And some of the homework assignments was to watch an episode of Blackish, to eat at a, have dinner or patronize a Black-owned restaurant. And I work in a really affluent school district. So to see them doing this type of work to combat and to put things in place to make people of color comfortable and to sort of work on the ignorance that belies all those type of microaggressions, I just thought it was really, really commendable. And I'm just happy to be in a space and to work for a district and to be in an environment where this is a priority. I mean, 14 days in a row, we had homework, which, I kind of didn't have to work really hard to learn how to, what goes on in Black culture. But I was happy that other coworkers that wouldn't have ordinarily had known certain things, that they were required to learn something about Black culture and about things that need to be normalized that Black people do. And that's what I was going to say.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone. I enjoy listening to everyone's point of view and perspective on the questions that we were asking. I feel like a lot of value has been added to this discussion from having your perspectives.
Yeah, just definitely thank you to all the panelists. Definitely loved hearing about your backgrounds, where you came from, the path you're all on now. Definitely wish you all the best in everything that you're working on. I know we'll all keep in touch and we'll keep hearing great things that you're all doing. Thank you to the audience for engaging, asking great questions, keeping the chat going throughout. Super excited for the next event. And yeah, if you all have anything that you have working on that you want to promote or, just share with us all, this would be the time to do that right now.
And also, if you have any closing remarks, panelists, this is a good time as well to say them.
I want to thank you all for sharing and giving me this opportunity to share as well. I dropped my personal website in the chat, which links out to my social media. And everyone, continue to wear your masks, please, and get vaccinated. Thanks.
Everyone for coming. I think the biggest takeaways from this panel is network and grind. Everyone who's here, this was the right thing. This was a good choice of use of your time today. So network and grind, if you didn't hear anything else, make sure you heard that.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, everyone. Walter and Tracy, thank you for putting this together. This is such an incredible opportunity for people to come in and listen to, get some knowledge. So really thank you for putting this all together.
Yes, thank you all. This has been great. I think this is a good step. So networking, this is the place to be. I appreciate all of the conversation and thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me. It's nice to meet everyone, and I hope the audience enjoyed the panel. Thank you.